Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. First question. I know you've covered no-gainers pretty extensively, but what about a no-gainer who puts on a lot of weight just from overeating? Would they never adjust to carrying the extra weight? And he went on to state that what he meant was that don't they get used to carrying their own body weight? Don't they get stronger from being fatter and carrying that extra weight around? All right, good question. And to answer that question, no, they won't get stronger. It's going to become more and more difficult for that person to walk around and move the heavier they get, because you have to understand moving around a heavy body is the same as you trying to walk around with a heavy backpack on or with a big heavy loaded vest. You adapt to exercise. The no gainer does not. So if they add 100 pounds of body weight of fat to themselves, it's going to be the same as if you right now, with no conditioning to it, were to try to walk around with an extra 100-pound weighted vest on. That's how it's going to feel to them, and it's always going to feel that way to them. It's not going to get easier. And so again, people aren't understanding the no gainer is really screwed in a lot of ways. The no gainer really can't afford to be obese. I mean, you talk about a segment of the population that can't afford to be obese. You have a segment of the population that don't get all the health benefits of exercise to offset the negatives of gaining fat, and they don't get stronger to help carry their extra body weight around. They don't get conditioned to it. So yes, if a no gainer gains a bunch of fat, they are really and truly fucked on every level. It's not an option for them. They have to really manage what they eat. And again, it sucks, but that's why I've said before, no gainers tend to avoid physical endeavors oftentimes, and that's why you see them go into other things, and a lot of them end up being really nerdy people who are very successful at some cerebral activities. All right, next question. I seem to have a lot more strength on the overhead press when I use a narrow grip, similar to the one you advise on the closed grip bench press. Is there a reason for this, and should I continue to overhead press with such a grip? Yeah, and I actually advocate a fairly narrow grip for most people overhead pressing, and the reason for it, you're going to be stronger and you're going to push the weight through a longer range of motion. That's overall a fantastic combination, because on a lot of exercises, having to move the weight through a longer range of motion means reducing the weight. On the overhead press, many people are stronger, and the reason is it puts your shoulder joints at a better anatomical position so that it puts less stress on them, and the brunt of the longer range of motion allows you to get more tricep in it. The actual movement itself, doing it narrower, lets you recruit the triceps heavier in your overhead pressing, and accordingly, with that extra range of motion you're adding in, the triceps take the brunt of that extra work. And now some people would say something like, well, I don't want to put my triceps into a big pressing movement, because I'm trying to work the primary movers. Well, the thing is, your upper chest and your delts are getting worked heavily on any overhead press, full range of motion. So that shouldn't be a concern for you. But the benefit is that it is going to make your triceps bigger and stronger. And the same people, it's really funny, who would focus upon taking their triceps out of a movement like that are the same people who seem to feel the need to do 10 to 15 sets of tricep isolation movements every week. It's really funny, because in a lot of ways they're shooting themselves in the foot. They're making themselves be forced to do extra tricep work, when if they did these big heavy compounds certain ways and through the full range of motion, their triceps would be tremendously developed. Because you think about it, really, closed grip bench press, overhead pressing, weighted dips, all done correctly, can develop absolutely enormous and powerful triceps, while at the same time improving your delts and your chest. But guys don't want to think about it that way, and so they want to end up isolating everything without realizing that the more they can get a lot of other muscles involved, particularly powerhouses like the triceps, involved into any of the pressing, is not going to detract from the development of the other muscles. It's just going to add to the development of your triceps, and it's going to add to your overall strength. Because in this case, you're not only recruiting more tricep, you're moving the weight through a longer range of motion. That's just good for all around strength and development. A nice narrow grip, full range of motion overhead press, whether it's a push press or even a strict press, is a fantastic overall full body exercise that just happens to give you really big shoulders on top of it. And that's a good way to look at it. All right, next question. I have a fucked up shoulder. What is the safest chest exercise I can do? It doesn't have to be isolating or primary mover. I've been out of the game since my injury 2 months ago. I couldn't even do arms because of that shit. So yeah, any advice would be great. All right, safest chest exercises for your shoulders are anything that allow you to tuck the elbows fully at the bottom. What I'm going to recommend is, whether it's flat, decline, or incline, doing a narrow grip bench press, Again, about shoulder width, so a closed grip bench press, and bringing the weight lower down on your chest so that your elbows are fully tucked at the bottom. Alternatively, if you have access to narrow dipping bars, right, fairly narrow ones, not ones that make you go out wide. Some of those V ones go out really wide. Any exercise that lets you have your palms facing each other for the chest, like again, dips like that done with a narrow grip, or dumbbells. You could do dumbbells either turned into a 45 or a full 90-degree turn in. That's something I noticed that Big J does, and I talked to him about that in person when we had met before. As someone who has had a lot of shoulder issues, he's had major shoulder injuries, that has actually helped him continue to train his chest in spite of those, of doing his dumbbell presses with his palms actually facing each other and doing them really low down on the chest. That puts the least stress possible on your shoulder joints. So look into doing those. All right, next question. Jason, how much does mental strength come into weightlifting? It seems since my compound lifts have become heavy, I feel anxious / nervous that the weight is too much before the lift, and relief and sense of achievement once completed. It seems as though my physical strength outweighs what my mind thinks I can achieve in the gym. How much of a part of weightlifting does the mind play? As far as training numbers go, honestly, it's not that big of a deal, because if you can even keep your level of arousal low and just hit training maxes, meaning fairly calm training maxes that are just the most you can do without psyching yourself up and maintaining good form, you're going to get a lot stronger. Now, when it comes to hitting true maxes, or what we call competition maxes, and a lot of guys choose to do those in the gym, but I don't recommend you hit competition maxes outside of competition. Your mental psych up, your attitude is tremendously critical. It could literally mean the difference between lifting 5 or 10% more weight in some cases. That's why a lot of guys use the ammonia salts, because it clears their head. It gives them focus. A lot of guys choose to jam to certain music. They have a meditation routine they do. They have self-talks that they give themselves. Their coaches psych them up psychologically and give them pep talks oftentimes right before they attempt like a third attempt in a powerlifting meet, or even like a big Olympic lifting event. So there's a lot to the psychological component to maximum power, but it really shouldn't affect your day-to-day training at the gym much, because with minimal psyching and just walking in calm and no real thought to your attitude, it's actually possible to develop tremendous strength and still lift very heavy weights. And there can be something to be said for actually reducing your level of psych up if you want to train at a higher frequency, meaning if you're only doing a lift 2 or 3 times a week, you can get a little more psyched up. But guys like the Bulgarian style training, I believe Matt Perryman talked about that a lot, that actually keeping yourself calm and not talking yourself up and getting yourself psychologically aroused or jamming to music can actually help prevent your peripheral nervous system from becoming as fatigued, and it will let you hit maxes, training maxes at least, at a higher frequency, meaning as often as every day, and in some cases multiple times a day, without burning out. So it actually, believe it or not psyching yourself up can actually be a very valuable training tool to get stronger. But when it comes to actually truly lifting a maximum weight, your psychology, your thought process, what you're telling yourself in your head can be massively important, and it can affect your lifts on a very real level. It can literally mean the difference sometimes between adding 50, 70, or 100 pounds to a lift in some cases, as crazy as that sounds. All right, next question. Can one separate the strength and hypertrophy portion of a workout in one day, i.g. 3x3 squats in the AM, and then come back in the evening and do hypertrophy leg work? Thanks. You could, but I wouldn't recommend it. If you go back and listen to the videos I've done in the last day or two talking about not mixing rep ranges in the same workout, essentially you're still doing the same thing, because most of your adaptation's happening over the next 24 hours, and in some cases up to 48 hours. You are interfering with that. And if you remember what I said about balancing the recovery methods for the different things, you are coming in and you're still having the peripheral nervous system fatigue from the 3x3 when you're coming in and doing the higher volume work. You are going to reduce how frequently you can train again. And I would recommend that if you're wanting to train at such a high frequency on the squat, that you're wanting to train it twice in a day, you might want to consider going to some sort of Bulgarian style training, because you clearly are wanting to train the squat at an ultra high frequency. And honestly, if you're wanting to train at that level of frequency, you need to drop what you're calling hypertrophy workout, which is really metabolic fatigue work, because it's really just incompatible with very, very high frequencies of training on something like the barbell squat. You're absolutely going to burn yourself out very quickly trying to do what you're talking about doing. If you're going to train, again, twice a day means that you're ready to go to, some people do it and they'll only do that 2 or 3 times a week. But you're going to get better results if you just go to squatting once a day, every day if you do that. And if you do that, you really need to stay under 5 reps entirely. And you need to be avoiding any sort of high rep leg work in between as well, other than just list cardio. All right, next question. Law of accommodation. Should you switch up exercises every few weeks? Bullshit or not? If you're thinking you need to switch up exercises every few weeks, no, that's bullshit. That's not understanding the law of accommodation. The law of accommodation means that after 3 weeks of the same training stimulus, you stop adapting to it. So what that means is that after 3 weeks, you need to be adding weight to the bar, or you need to be changing your rep ranges. And that's why most classic block periodization models run 3-week blocks, meaning every 3 weeks you end up changing the rep range and the intensity, or you dramatically change the volume. And the reason for that is that you're adapting to what you're doing after 3 weeks. And so, and again, that only applies to slightly more advanced lifters who are out of their noob game. Someone with at least 6 months of continual training experiences, because noobs, they don't have to worry about the law of accommodation. They just grow no matter what. They can just keep adding weight. As long as they're eating and sleeping enough, they can just keep adding weight to the bar over and over and over for months. But yeah, once you get through those noob gains, you basically probably need to change something every 3 weeks, but it doesn't need to be the exercises. You could actually just make sure that you change your workloads. Meaning if you've been doing, squats with a given weight, you need to add weight to the bar after 3 weeks, even if it means you lose a couple of reps and you go to a different rep range. That's what you have to do to get through the law of accommodation. It's the little things like that that matter. Or you could even reduce the weight slightly and go to higher reps. But the thing is, you're going to need to change the workload in some way if you want to continue to adapt. And that's what most classical models of periodization are built around. All right, next question. You talk often about human evolution, the development of cooking food, and its effect on the growth of the brain. How important to human evolution was the domestication of dogs? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. While this is slightly off topic, I love this question because it still fits in with a lot of the series of videos I've done talking about human development over time. Dogs actually are really interesting as far as our evolution goes, and as far as even our food and everything goes, because dogs, and by dogs I mean modern domesticated breeds of dogs, evolved right next to us. Because what we did, we learned thousands and thousands of years ago, we took wolves and we domesticated them because they offered a lot to us. And actually dogs' diets tend to match ours very well, and the reason they do so well on people food in general, and yes, the healthiest dogs are not fed dog food, they're fed healthy foods that you're eating, meaning things like rice, vegetables, steamed meat, stuff like that. Your dogs will actually oftentimes live to be over 20 years on that. There are veterinarians who've noted that. That's actually better for your dogs than even the best dog foods. Most dogs die of cancer due to their diets and the foods we give them. But they developed to eat our foods next to us, and they were intrinsic to kind of a lot of our development as a species, because dogs weren't just companions and pets. All the original dogs, we used them to hunt with, and we used them as watchdogs in the night, meaning no stranger from another tribe could sneak into the camp, steal your food, steal your children, steal your women, and run back out with them if you had dogs, because the dogs would alert you, the dogs would often attack them, the dogs would at the very least start barking. Like, dogs were an intrinsic part of our evolution as individual tribes at the smaller level, and the fact that they helped us obtain food due to their tracking skills. So basically the dog's sense of smell and their sense of hearing compared to ours actually tremendously affected us on a lot of levels. And they were a very, very critical part of early tribal life, and that's the reason you see dogs from all over the world. I mean, we have famous breeds of dogs that we have that recognized even by the Kennel Club and stuff, that have come from everywhere. I mean, all the way down into Africa, all up certain breeds through Europe, all the way through Asia, far into Asia, all the way over there. Dogs have just always been a big part of human history as far as we know. We've had dogs for all this time, for everything from guard dogs, watch dogs, to hunting dogs. And it wasn't until later that people bred certain companion breeds. But yeah, the dog's sense of smell and hearing allowed us to obtain a lot of foods easier for hunting. And again, they helped guard the camp at night. And so dogs have been very, very loved for thousands of years. And that's one reason that people really do tend to, love dogs so much, is that it's just because of our history with them. They helped us so much early on during tribal days. And interestingly enough, what's been noted, the most research we've seen on dogs has actually shown that dogs actually love you more than you love your own children. Like, that's something that has been studied based upon their hormonal response and the oxytocin that they make. Because dogs are such an intrinsic part of our early life, we bred them to love us more. And they genuinely and truly love their owners and masters. Dogs, they accept you usually as the alpha of their pack most of the time, because they're very pack-oriented animals. But they produce something like 3 times the oxytocin when their owner touches them than when a human being touches a person they're in love with. So actually, your dog actually loves you more than the person that you're in love with, at least on the chemical level, which is interesting. And that explains their loyalty so much. There's a reason they're loyal, and it's hormonal in nature, because they actually deeply love the other members of their pack. Their family, they love you on a deeper level than humans are actually capable of loving, which is really interesting. That actually explains their loyalty on a biochemistry level. So yeah, they're an intrinsic part of human history. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. And as usual, I'm going to do this in 2 parts, and I think I've got just enough questions to do a gear talk for part 3. So, here we go. First question. It is well documented that sleep is imperative for proper recovery and muscle building. However, if you don't get enough sleep during the week due to job and stress-related factors, does sleeping more on the weekend or your days off from work make up for the lack of sleep during the rest of the week? Thanks. All right, great question, and kind of difficult to answer, because you have to define what you mean by make up for. Meaning, can you catch up on lost sleep and lost recovery from it? Yeah, you can catch up on lost sleep, and when you finally catch up on that lost sleep, let's say you did your training Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but you didn't get enough sleep, right? And then you finally catch up on your sleep on, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, when you're no longer working and training and all of that. Do you finally recover if you got enough sleep for it on the extra days? Yes, you finally recover then. Do you catch up for it as far as all your other things go, your memory partitioning, hormone levels, everything else that might be having issues as a result of the reduced sleep Monday through Friday? Yeah, you'll catch up for it on the weekend. However, the thing is, while you can catch up on lost sleep, you can't store up extra sleep. And that's something that researchers in the area of sleep studies have noticed. This is stuff that I remember professors talking about quite a bit when I had a professor discussing this in detail. They basically broke that down, that you can't store up extra sleep. So does this mean that your gains will be the same? If you catch up to, say, your 8 hours a night, you catch up for it finally on the weekend because you sleep in for 12 or 13 hours a couple days. No, your gains won't be equal. And the reason is because you missed some of your growth window on the Monday through Friday. Now, what you're going to get, you're going to fully recover probably if the sleep was the recovery issue on the weekend. And that means that you're going to fully adapt to your Friday workout. But your Monday and Tuesday workouts, if you're a bit sleep deprived, you're not going to gain quite as much adaptation from them. Meaning the reduced sleep on the same days as the training means you're going to go into those workouts the Wednesday and the Friday. You're going to go into those with a little less strength and a little less recovery. So what you're generally going to find is that probably your Monday workouts are going to tend to be your best because you've gone into them fully refreshed in that situation. And I'm not saying everyone does this on the weekend and then it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but I'm giving you a schedule to understand it. Because you're going to have fully adapted and recovered and you're finally going to catch up. Your Monday workouts are usually going to be your best peak strength. But your Wednesday and Friday workouts, you're not going to be performing optimally because you haven't fully recovered from the others. So, ultimately, you could be shortchanging yourself some of your progress, some of your strength, some of your muscle mass as a result of the sleep deprivation throughout the week. So I might suggest to people that they find a little better use of their time, meaning Very few people, unless you do shift work. And if you do shift work to where you do 24s and things like that, this is going to happen sometimes. But people who work no more than 12-hour days, probably not a problem. You can still find a way to schedule these things and get your 8 hours of sleep, get your commutes, your workouts, everything else in. And I would suggest that if you have a sleep issue, if you work 12-hour shifts Monday through Friday, 12-hour shifts back to back, you have no business doing any sort of high volume training. You probably need to limit your workouts to 30 or 45 minutes at the very most, because the actual workout length combined with your commute might actually be costing you 30 minutes of sleep on those days. And that 30 minutes of extra sleep, or that hour of extra sleep, is going to be worth a hell of a lot more progress for someone who's struggling to get their 8 hours due to their schedule in the middle of the week. It's going to be worth a lot more progress than that extra 5 or 6 or 10 sets you're trying to squeeze in. It's going to be worth a lot more muscle gains. Recovery is more important than volume. And I can't understate that. That can't be overstated enough. All right, next question. Is a recomp possible on your novice program by eating strictly keto? I eat keto for health reasons, therefore won't be able to take advantage of glycogen supercompensation from refeeds. All right, good question. And I'm assuming you have something like epilepsy or some other condition in which you're being prescribed a ketogenic diet. If not, and you're actually seriously concerned about recompositioning, you might want to reconsider a strict keto diet. But if your doctor has medically prescribed this for you, then obviously you need to follow it. Now, can you still recomposition as a novice on a strict ketogenic diet, what a lot of people will call an SKD, which is a standard ketogenic diet? Yeah, you can recomp. You're not going to have, it's full of glycogen stores, but it's totally doable. And the reason is you're basically still a novice lifter. Well, novice lifters, as long as they get sufficient protein and aren't nutrient deficient and get enough sleep, and in fact, in some cases, I've seen novices recomposition on terrible diets, as long as they kept their caloric balance pretty close to maintenance. I've seen novice lifters come in and train hard who are not on the best of diets. They might actually have some deficient diets who still recomposition, and that's because when you're on a well-written, structured program with solid progressive overload on your big movements, that again is well written, what you find is that novices tend to recomposition at least a little bit, almost irrespective of their diet. The only way a novice doesn't recomposition is if they starve themselves so badly that they're in an enormous calorie deficit and just peeling off body fat at a massive rate, in which case they might not gain muscle, but again, if they're morbidly obese, they'll still gain muscle doing it. Or someone who overeats so much that they're gaining more than 2 pounds a week. That's going to be the exception. A guy who's gaining more than 2 pounds a week is not going to lose body fat. As an early novice, he's going to gain body fat. But outside of the extremes where people are either extreme bulking or cutting, novices on a well-written, structured program, and mine qualifies, my novice program is, you're going to tend to gain some muscle and lose some fat no matter what your diet is like, as long as it's not too extreme. Now, we could argue that a ketogenic diet is pretty extreme, but the thing is, if you're getting sufficient protein and you're not burning through a lot of glycogen, meaning you're not doing a bunch of HIIT cardio or GPP work around those 3 workouts every week in addition to them, you're probably going to be okay. You're going to hold less muscle glycogen. You might not gain quite as much muscle as you could have, but even on a strict ketogenic diet on the program, as long as protein, total calories, and total sleep and rest are sufficient, you're probably still going to be able to recomposition even on a strict ketogenic diet with no refeeds. So the answer, short answer, yeah, you should be fine as long as those other factors are in place. All right, next question. I've been lifting for a little over a year now. For the past couple of months, I've been doing 1 set per exercise. I tried your novice program, but it kicked my ass. My strength isn't where I'd like it to be, however. When I started lifting, I was nearly 400 pounds, so I've had to eat a caloric deficit all the way through. Because of this, would I hit my newbie gains cap a little later than someone who could focus entirely on building muscle? All right, brother, fantastic question. And if you're telling me that you started at 400 pounds and you've been in a caloric deficit for over a year straight now while actually following my structured program, like you tried my novice program and you cut back to 1 set, I'm going to have to say congratulations, job well fucking done. So that aside, let's get over to your real question. You have been losing weight continually for over a year. yes, you're going to miss some of your new gains. It's going to take longer because, simply put, you've been in a big caloric deficit, and you can gain muscle and strength in a caloric deficit as someone who's morbidly obese. It can absolutely be done. The thing is, are you going to gain as much muscle as someone who had been able to eat a small surplus? No, you're not. So if you haven't been able to gain as much muscle of them because of dietary restriction, and I agree with your stance of what you're doing. If you started at 400 pounds, losing 200 pounds at this point is probably more important than gaining a few extra pounds of muscle. Way, way more important for your well-being, health, and even athleticism. Vastly more important. So keep doing what you're doing there. Is it going to take you longer? Yeah. Because you've been in a caloric deficit the entire time, I would not expect you to hit my noob strength gain standards in the first year, because as I've stated in those standards, that's for people who are in good health, who are able to eat sufficient food. That's one of the things I point out, and some other factors as well for people to hit what I consider to be the target numbers. Well, if you started obese, you're not in good health, and if you've been losing weight, you're not getting sufficient food. So that being said, it could take you an extra 6 to 8 months to milk out those full new gains. To get all of them completed, to gain every last ounce of them, it could probably take you 50 to 60% longer than someone else to get there. So when you get to that 18-month mark, if you're still pushing on a good program and you haven't been able to bench 2 plates, squat 3 plates, deadlift 4 plates yet, might be some other factors to look at, but I wouldn't expect it to be unreasonable to take you 18 to 20 months to do so, given everything that you've described. So that's just reasonable. You got to remember, man, you're losing a lot of weight as you go. And yeah, you're going to gain a decent amount of muscle and strength, but nowhere near a guy who started a lot leaner and who's able to overeat. He's just started with an advantage over you. But the thing is, you're still making an enormous progress also. I mean, losing all that body fat as you go is an enormous life-changing and quality of life-changing thing to do. So that's worth more, in my opinion, than gaining a little bit of extra muscle. And again, hopefully you share that same opinion. But yeah, give it to the 18 to 20 month mark and then see where you're really at, and see where you're at then. And then you can get a more honest assessment, because you just haven't been able to focus entirely on building muscle while losing that weight. It is what it is. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. Thanks for everything so far. My core strength sucks. I think it's my weak link for squats and deadlifts. What can I do to increase this? I've heard planks are a great exercise, but I'm looking to get the best bang for my bucks. Thanks very much. Now, I think planks and weighted planks are fantastic because, again, they train your core to be strong in a static position, and that's going to help you quite a bit on your deadlift and your squat. So if you feel it's your weak link in your deadlift and your squat, I would definitely consider doing those. The other thing that you probably want to do, and again, this is out of the West Side Barbell book. I took this from Louis Simmons because, again, he's always pointed out that if you're standing or you're on any playing field and you get hit in the guts, what position you're in when you usually get hit in the guts, or you get kicked in the guts in a fight or MMA or anything else, you're usually on your feet. When you're doing the squat and the deadlift, where are you? Are you laying on the ground, or are you standing on your feet? You're up on your feet. So if you want true specificity of training, you need to be doing standing core work. If you want it to have the best possible carryover to those exercises, standing core work. And there are plenty of videos, if you dig through my training playlist, of both me and my girlfriend doing standing band crunches. So if you want to see how they're executed, standing band crunches combined with weighted planks are probably the two biggest bang for your buck as far as improving your overall core strength that will carry over to your squat and deadlift. And they're both very, very good for overall athleticism for field athletes as well, or even contact sport athletes. So definitely add those to your list. Do those for a few months, and I think your core weakness will be sorted right out. All right, next question. Jason, could you make an update on a training style you mentioned before now that we have new data from Dr. Brad? The training where you use moderately heavy, 70 to 80% intensity, high set 10 sets, lower rep 3 reps with low rest, 30 to 60 seconds. It was training for power and hypertrophy. Do you think this training is still viable for both? Do you think training this way could benefit someone training for aesthetic strength and power? Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I talked about that is that Dr. Brad had done a study in which he showed that doing 7 sets of 3 or 8 sets of 3, I forget which it was, produced just as much hypertrophy gain, that's muscle mass gain, as people who were doing 3 sets of 10 or 3 sets of 8. So something in that range. And that's what he showed in the data is that, full body type programs doing that way produce tremendous results. Now, for me personally, if you recall, I demonstrated that I was doing that. A lot of my off-season powerlifting before I went to the British Grand Prix, if you remember all my training footage, I was doing a lot of that. And a lot of times that's called accumulation training. Some people will call it dynamic effort, other people will call it accumulation training, but the idea is that you're doing triples so that you can maximize speed and power. Because normally, obviously, you are not going to hit failure with 80% with triples. You're nowhere near failure. But the idea is that by doing them as explosively and as quickly as possible, you're still hitting your upper threshold muscle fibers, which you are. You don't need as long of breaks to maintain those. Now, you're saying that based on Dr. Brad's stuff for hypertrophy because he's talking about sets where you're getting close to exhaustion. When we're talking about that 3-minute break, you're talking about sets that you're taking way into exhaustion. Well, with 80%, you should be able to do, 6 or 7 reps sometimes, somewhere between 5 and 7 reps easily, but you're doing triples. That's why you get away with the shorter breaks. The reason Dr. Brad said that you need the longer breaks is because you get stuck using a lighter weight. You can't perform as well. You go to do 3 sets of a heavy exercise with your 8 or 9 rep max. There's no way you're going to hit 8 reps 3 times in a row with 1 minute. You just can't. The weight's going to have to be reduced. Therefore, it's less tension on the bar. With accumulation training like this, you're not doing it just for weight. You're doing it for speed and power. So you're doing it for the speed component. And I used to do a lot of that. You guys would see me do pause squats, pen lay rows, pause presses, but they were all fast and explosive. A triple, wait 30 to 60 seconds, do it again. But you'll note they were all exercises with a power or a pause component. And you'll also note that I would build weight over time. So what I would do, remember on the squat, I started with something like 380 pounds. And I would build up to where I could do 10 sets of 3 with no more than 60 seconds between. And when I got to the point where I could do all 10 sets without any grinders, I would increase the weight and do as many sets as I could. And sometimes it would drop down to 7 and I would increase weight. And I believe when I got near the end, what I was doing was 10 sets of 3 with about 420 for pause squats with those short breaks. And then I started training for power again. But the thing is, you'll note with that style of training, since we know it induces just as much hypertrophy as the other, it's great for hypertrophy. It's one of the best forms of power training. So what more do you want other than it takes longer? And that's the thing you've got to keep in mind. You're talking about spending, because 60 seconds between 10 sets, you're spending 10 up to 15 minutes between the warm-up preparing for an exercise on one exercise. For a lot of people, that's just unacceptable for hypertrophy. A lot of guys want to get in and do their 3 sets. With 3 minutes between, you do 1 set, rest 3 minutes, do another set, rest 3 minutes. That's only 2 3-minute breaks. This you're done in like 7 or 8 minutes. The other simply takes more time. It's a time economy issue, but it produces, as far as we know from the data, pretty much equal hypertrophy, but you get a better speed strength component, a better starting strength component. So it has a better power carryover. But for someone who doesn't mind spending the extra time in the gym, accumulation training like that is absolutely fantastic. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.